Welcome back. Welcome in. Country Roads Confidential here at EerSports.com, part of the Paramount Podcast Network. I am Mike Casazza here, marching toward the regular season here. Big 12 football 2022 on the way. We're going to get to know the opponents and begin today with a conversation about the Oklahoma Sooners. Nobody better here than Joey Helmer from OUInsider, the editor there, man who makes the wheels spin, the content pour forth on the screen. Joey, welcome and thank you for helping me out. How are things down in Oklahoma? An unusual, productive, busy, newsy offseason down there.
Yeah, no, it has been. Obviously, the baseball team took us in all the way almost to July, and now we're in July. But yeah, a newsy offseason for the football program because there's been quite a bit of change. It's the welcoming of the Brent Venables era and some new players, obviously a transfer quarterback and Dylan Gabriel along with that. And so a number of other guys, and there's plenty of excitement right now around this Oklahoma program with all the newness going on.
Outstanding. We're going to backfill here, start at the end, if that's okay. And I'm sure as we work toward the beginning, which would be the conclusion, we're going to touch on a lot of the themes that you just mentioned right there. But as I said, let's start at the finish, which is Oklahoma's 2022 season could go in, I don't know, I think a lot of people would agree different directions. This might be the last time that West Virginia sees the Sooners in the Big 12. And as long as the Mountaineers have known them, Oklahoma's been the Big 12. Oklahoma's been Oklahoma. They haven't beaten the Sooners. You know, the Sooners haven't won every conference title, but it's been close. We talked about how a lot has changed, but you still get the idea that Oklahoma is still Oklahoma. It's going to be a favorite to win the league or represent the league in the college football playoff. You go from Stoops to Riley to Venables, so you still have that quote unquote Oklahoma guy in there. Portal acquisitions, that indicates that people still believe you have a good staff there. If you're Venables at the end of the season, though, is Oklahoma still Oklahoma? What do you expect the outcome to be for this team?
Well, I think when you talk to people around the program, they certainly believe that they're still, and again, a Big 12 championship contender. It seems like kind of the prevailing theme with some of the other people, be it media or whatever, is that they're going to be a step down off of that in Brent Venables' first season. And I'm not so sure I see that. I think they're going to be favored in most every game, if not every game. And there's a ton of talent on this roster. There really is. You mentioned the incoming talent that Venables is going to have to work with. And our Josh Pate here at 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports HQ said that if Oklahoma goes over the 9-win threshold, that Venables will be a coach of the year candidate. And to me, that kind of, signifies how people think about this Oklahoma team, that they will be that step below what they've been, but I'm not so sure that's the case. I expect them to be in the Big 12 championship race and potentially win the Big 12 championship again this season after they were unable to continue their streak last year.
I don't want to step on your toes here, but one thing, because I might answer the next question, one thing that stands out about the team in the season is the schedule. In succession here early on at Nebraska, against Kansas State, which has full-blown sleeper status right now, at TCU, who knows, and then obviously Texas. You get a bit of a reprieve in the middle, I think, against Kansas and Iowa State, and then it's Baylor, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech. Those are two pretty good chunks there. And if they're good enough, they're going to overcome that, which kind of leads me to this here. We have some educated audience here, people who follow your work. They know about Oklahoma. I think people who follow West Virginia on our site have a good idea about the major topics here. So let's go off the radar, kind of beneath the surface, lift the hood, if you will. Share with us something about Oklahoma that in this part of the offseason that has your attention. It could be positive, it could be negative, but it's not an obvious thing. It's something that you have unearthed and you're going to follow, and it's going to have people's attention. And I don't know, late November, people are going to say, you know what? I know I heard about this in July because I heard Joey Helmer on that podcast there. What is that person, that thing, that topic here about the Sooners that kind of it's under your list of things to keep an eye on right now?
I think people around these parts, they know about this, but maybe when you go to the coast and a little bit farther away from Norman, they don't know about the kind of the off the field stuff that Brent Venables has been developing with this program. It's really got a closeness right now that is different. And it seems almost cliche to talk about those kinds of things at times, but it seemed like this team was kind of fractured in terms of chemistry. And so when you look at this Oklahoma team, if we're in, late October and early November and they really have it rolling, I think just some of the things that Brent Venables has put together off the field will be a major factor in that. And I think at times that's overstated, but with this team, it can't be. It seems like they've got away from that a little bit. But again, I feel like the team was a bit fractured last year, and Venables realized a lot of those things as soon as he took over. So it's not necessarily an on the field thing, but just the way he's managing his roster right now, the way his team is getting out in the community and doing things, and those all will play dividends, I think, as the season goes on. And really from a macro perspective, as his tenure goes on here, that's to be a big part of what his plan is. You've seen these things come from Bill Snyder and his program at Kansas State, and also his time under Bob Stoops and then Dabo Swinney. And so he's brought a lot of these things to the table. And I think if people take a closer look at Oklahoma's program, they will see the impact and benefit of those things.
All right, I'm going to interview on my toes here because my next question was answered, I think, and that was, is everything okay with the Sooners? It sounds like yes, and maybe more so than there is cause for alarm. There's cause for optimism that what had maybe gone off path is now back on the straight and narrow. But let me ask you this. When you consider that, as we talked about, Oklahoma's been Oklahoma, it's had continuity from Stoops to Riley to now Venables. It's won. It's been in the playoff. It's a premier brand in the sport, and it still would have been in the SEC. It's not often you see a move like Riley leaving one of the biggest names in the sport for another one of the biggest names in sports that maybe isn't as well situated as Oklahoma is. And then we've seen some additional turnover in the roster and the staff, and some of that was necessary and predictable. But let me ask this: instead of saying, "Is everything okay?" What do you think happened, and how did we get to this point where you kind of had to steer everything back on the road, which is maybe unusual when you from afar you look at it and say, "Boy, that program's been in the right lane." Going fast and passing everybody for quite some time.
Yeah, it's tough. I think it's tough to put a finger on it. I just think when you look, there was some kind of disconnect at some point. And again, it's hard to put a finger on exactly what it was, but I think it comes back to culture a little bit. I'm very curious to see how things go in that regard at USC for Lincoln Riley and his staff, because again, I come back to it, and one of the very first things that Brent Venables established with his program here was not the on the field things, the plays and the personnel and how they're going to operate on both sides of the ball, but rather how this team is going to be structured in terms of discipline and those kinds of things. And I'm not so sure that the emphasis was as big as it is under the previous regime as it is now under the current regime. So perhaps that had some kind of effect on the way things went. But again, you say all that, and you have to give Lincoln Riley credit for still the success that Oklahoma had. I mean, they went to the college football playoff. They won multiple Big 12 championships, and really the only thing they didn't do is win a playoff game and win the national championship. So it is not as if this has been a program that has struggled by any means. This is a bit of a unique situation because typically when you have a coaching change at a place like Oklahoma, this is 2 times in a row now where it hasn't been because it's been a struggling program that there's been a change. And so All of that is interesting, but yeah, I think there was a bit of a disconnect from a cultural standpoint. If I was to answer with my honest opinion of that.
Yeah, I think if you overlay this transition with Bob Stoops' transition, the what's wrong is very different now than it was right then back then. So a good place that perhaps soon gets better, which leads us back onto the field here as we shift toward the finish. We mentioned, portal acquisitions seem like they've been good. Talent never really an issue with Oklahoma, even though I'm still stunned. Just one preseason all conference player, and it's the punter here. When I look at their offensive and defensive lines the past few years, it's amazing to me that there isn't somebody representing the offensive and defensive line. That could be just temporary. By the end of the season, it could change. I'll ask you, Joey, to omit quarterback because we'll get to him in a second. But who should we be aware of on this roster that we just don't know about now, but the talent, the potential, the opportunities there to flourish on offense, on defense, heck, on special teams?
I should say, but what I was referring to on the cultural stuff was the sole mission. So, for anyone that was wondering exactly what I was talking about, that's the program that Venables is installed. But in terms of guys to keep an eye on, to me, I think Ethan Downs at defensive end is someone that will really raise people's eyebrows. He's from Weatherford, Oklahoma, a very, very explosive defensive end, a guy that could be good in both run support and getting after the quarterback as well. And so Ethan Downs there, Jalen Redmond at defensive tackle is another guy to keep an eye on. And then we'll see on the offensive line. I think if Andrew Rame is able to be healthy and stay healthy at center, he could have a really good season. Anton Harrison at tackle. So those are some of the guys. And then you get to the skill position, and it was really kind of alarming to me that Marvin Mims was not listed as a preseason All Big 12 player at wide receiver. I think that Lincoln Riley and his staff may not have used him right at times in getting him in the most explosive type playmaking situations as possible. So now I was surprised that he was not a mention. And then, some of those other guys and Key Lawrence at safety could also have a really big year. So the players are there. The talent is there. I don't think Oklahoma should look I don't think people should look and say with Oklahoma, well, they only have a punter on the preseason team. This is not going to be a good Oklahoma team, because I don't think that's going to be the case.
Theo Weiss is healthy too. That has to help as well.
That's another guy I didn't mention. Theo Weiss, who had a really good season but was injured last year. I've actually mentioned him a number of times as a potential breakout guy offensively. So yeah, that's absolutely good that you bring him up. He could have a really, really big year here.
Finally, we're going to wrap up here with Joey Helmer from OUInsider. We began at the finish. We're going to finish at the beginning. I hope that makes sense, because it always starts with quarterback in the Big 12. There are some situations that could be promising, could be disastrous, and some in the middle here. I think you probably trend toward successful when you look at who Oklahoma has, but I think we all felt the same way last year, that they couldn't get it wrong, and maybe they never got it right all the way last year. But Gabriel, preseason newcomer of the year in the Big 12, he knows Jeff Lebby. This is a guy who's got the talent and certainly the fit right now, probably with as good a cast around him for his season here with the Sooners. But tell us about the situation this year, because it's not just him. If things do go sideways, there are other guys, but I think the expectation is that this is Gabriel's job to lose, I guess, or keep, and then just to go as far as he can this year.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the main point here at quarterback. I think Dylan Gabriel, I've said this to a few people, maybe I've written it, but I've certainly said it off camera that I think Gabriel could very likely be in the Heisman Trophy race. I think he's that caliber of player. I think he's going to have that kind of skill players around him to put up the stats if he's a good decision maker. And you mentioned the familiarity with Jeff Lebby's offense. That's huge. As you learn a new offense, and a number of these players that have been around in Lincoln's offense, well, there's no better person to know it than the quarterback that's coming in. So that is no small thing. And yes, it's absolutely his offense, and Oklahoma offensively will, in large part, go how Dylan Gabriel goes. So I feel good about Oklahoma offensively. That kind of one of the big storylines coming out of the spring was just the tempo that they're running with. It's faster than the guys were used to before, and I think just from afar for fans around college football, maybe that tune into an Oklahoma game, I think that'll be an entertaining aspect for them watching Oklahoma offensively, and also for Sooners fans as well.
Yeah, there were times where no one was better playing fast in Oklahoma. And if you watch UCF and Ole Miss the past couple of years, you could have the same conversation about them. So perhaps past and present merge here too. And then just hearing your conversation here, the value of having a quarterback who knows the offensive coordinator. I think that West Virginia fans are nodding their heads and rubbing their hands together here because they have Graham Harrell, JT Daniels, and kind of hoping that that continuity pays off. Hey, one way to find out, these two meet November 12th in Morgantown. Last time, probably in Morgantown, maybe at all in the Big 12. Last opportunity for the Mountaineers to win one against the Sooners. And you have been prepared thanks to Joey Helmer from OUInsider. Joey, appreciate the time. Thanks for your insight. We look for you during the regular season.
Hey, thanks for having me on.